Thanksgiving, the time of year when families gather around the table, share meals, and count their blessings. It's a tradition passed down for generations, meant to bring people closer together. A day filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warmth of togetherness. For most, it's the highlight of the year, a holiday to reflect on all that is good and to cherish those we love. But in Atlanta, Georgia, for one family, this seemingly innocent day of celebration would turn into something unimaginable, something no one could have ever seen coming. A day meant to express gratitude would instead be marked by a chilling act of violence over something as simple as a word. A single word. A word that was never spoken. How does a disagreement, a minor conflict, spiral into a tragedy so deep that it leaves a family broken and a community in shock? What could possibly drive a person to commit the unthinkable, especially on a day that's supposed to be about love and forgiveness? What would possess someone to kill their spouse, the person they once promised to love and protect, over a moment as small as an unspoken apology? That's the burning question at the heart of this tragedy. And it all started with something so seemingly insignificant that no one could have imagined the devastating consequences. But, in this case, a refusal to say sorry led to a chain of events that ended in the ultimate betrayal, a fatal act of violence that shattered a family forever. What could make someone resort to murder over an apology that wasn't given? What happens when pride outweighs love, and when a simple misunderstanding spirals into something far darker? Tonight, we dive into the life of a woman whose future was stolen in an instant. A woman who didn't just lose her life, she lost it to something so senseless, so avoidable. A mother, a daughter, and a woman with a promising future ahead of her, all gone in the blink of an eye. As we uncover the details of this heartbreaking story, ask yourself, what would drive a man to cross that line? How did something so trivial, so simple, escalate into a deadly confrontation? This is the story of a Thanksgiving no one could have imagined. The story of a woman named whose life would be tragically ended over something as small as the failure to say sorry. Stay with us as we unravel the chilling details of a tragedy that could have been prevented, but wasn't. Tashiana Blake was the kind of person who lit up a room just by being in it. Her friends described her as warm, kind, and endlessly giving, a woman who would do anything to help someone in need. To her, family was everything. She worked tirelessly to ensure her two young children had the best childhood she could give them. Her love for them was boundless, evident in every hug, every bedtime story, and every moment she spent cheering them on at school events. On the surface, the Blake family seemed perfect. Dermot Blake, a 33-year-old Army sergeant, was often seen as the rock of the family. He was respected in his community for his discipline and dedication, the kind of man who carried himself with authority. Together, Tashiana and Dermot were the image of stability, a loving couple with two children and a bright future ahead of them. But there was another side to their story, a side that most people never saw. Behind the smiles in family photos and the carefully curated moments shared at gatherings, there were cracks forming in their seemingly perfect life. Dermot's demeanor, so composed and controlled in public, could shift in private. He had a temper that few outside the family ever witnessed, and it seemed to be growing worse as time went on. Tashiana's friends had begun to notice small changes in her. She wasn't as quick to accept invitations to outings, often saying she was too busy or needed to stay home. When she did attend events, she seemed distracted, her usual lightheartedness dimmed. She never spoke about any problems at home, but her closest confidants sensed that something wasn't right. Dermot's military career had undoubtedly left its mark on him. The stress, the demands, the experiences he rarely spoke of, it all weighed heavily on his shoulders. But there was more to his personality than just the effects of his service. He was a man who valued control above all else, and when things didn't go his way, his frustrations had a way of boiling over. The arguments between Tashiana and Dermot started small, disagreements about household chores, finances, or decisions about the kids. But over time, the tension between them grew. Dermot's temper flared more frequently, his outbursts leaving Tashiana walking on eggshells. Yet she stayed silent, whether out of fear, hope that things would improve, or a desire to shield her children from the truth. She kept her struggles hidden. Friends and family noticed the tension but didn't press too hard. After all, every couple has disagreements, right? To them, it was nothing more than the normal ups and downs of married life. But behind closed doors, Tashiana was carrying a weight that no one fully understood. As the months went by, the cracks in their relationship deepened. The arguments became more frequent, the silences more telling. Tashiana's once vibrant spirit seemed muted, her laughter less frequent. Still, she put on a brave face for her children, pouring her love and energy into them. For those who knew them, it was unthinkable that their story could end in tragedy. How could anyone imagine that this family, so full of promise, so seemingly normal, was on the verge of unraveling in the most devastating way? But the truth was there, hidden in the spaces between their smiles and silences, a truth that would soon come to light, changing everything forever. Thanksgiving, a time when families gather to celebrate, reflect, and share a meal. A time for forgiveness, for kindness. For the Blake family, the day began like any other. The house smelled of roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, the dining table adorned with autumn-themed decorations. Tashiana had carefully picked out weeks earlier. Dermot sat in the living room, his gaze fixed on the football game playing on the television. His children's laughter echoed from another room, their excitement for the holiday palpable. In the kitchen, Tashiana was a whirlwind of activity, humming softly as she prepared the meal. It was the kind of scene anyone might imagine when thinking of a perfect Thanksgiving. And for a brief moment, it seemed that way. Tashiana decided to capture the moment, to share her gratitude with her followers online. Her Instagram audience had always been a source of support, and she loved letting them in on little glimpses of her life. She propped up her phone on the kitchen counter and started a live stream. "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone," she said brightly, her voice warm and welcoming. The camera showed her smiling face as she stirred a pot on the stove. "I hope you're all having a wonderful day with your families. We've been cooking up a storm over here." The comments poured in almost instantly. "Looks amazing, Tashiana. I love the setup. Your family is beautiful. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours." She turned the camera to show her children sitting at the table, happily coloring Thanksgiving-themed printouts. They waved shyly at the screen, their innocence shining through. "Say hi, guys," Tashiana encouraged, laughing as they gave small giggly waves. Then, almost as if on cue, Dermot walked into the frame. He wore a forced smile, his body language stiff. Tashiana, ever the optimist, tried to engage him. "Dermot, say hi to everyone. They're wishing us a happy Thanksgiving," she said, her voice filled with the kind of cheer meant to smooth over any tension. He gave a curt wave, muttering, "Happy Thanksgiving," before walking out of view. The awkwardness wasn't lost on her audience. "Everything okay with your husband?" one follower asked in the comments. Tashiana's smile faltered for the briefest of moments before she replied, "Oh, he's just tired. It's been a long week." She quickly shifted the focus back to the food, listing off the dishes she had prepared. But the live stream had shown more than Tashiana intended. For those watching closely, Dermot's demeanor spoke volumes. After signing off, Tashiana put her phone down, her shoulders slumping slightly. She knew the tension between them was palpable, even to those who didn't know them personally. Still, she pressed on, determined to make the day as joyous as possible for her children. As the day wore on, the small cracks in their relationship grew more visible. The argument that had simmered earlier in the week resurfaced, sparked by something seemingly trivial, a disagreement about the way the table had been set. "You never listen to me," Dermot muttered as he stood in the kitchen doorway, his arms crossed. Tashiana sighed, her voice calm but tired. "It's Thanksgiving, Dermot. Can we just get through the day without this?" But Dermot wasn't willing to let it go. His tone grew sharper, his words cutting. For Tashiana, this wasn't new. She had learned to navigate his moods, to diffuse situations when they grew tense. She looked at him, her eyes steady. "I'm not doing this right now," and with that, she walked away, leaving Dermot standing there, his pride wounded. Dinner was a quiet affair. The children chatted happily, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension between their parents. Tashiana made an effort to keep the mood light, asking her kids about their favorite parts of the day. Dermot, however, was withdrawn. His answers were short, his gaze fixed on his plate. After dinner, Tashanya began clearing the table, humming softly to herself. She glanced at Dermot, who was now sitting on the couch, his arms folded tightly across his chest. "Dear Mott," she said gently, "can you help me with the dishes?" He didn't respond, his silence heavy. Tashyana paused, her hands resting on the edge of the sink. "I don't know what you want me to do," she said quietly. "I've tried to make today special for everyone. Can't that be enough?" Dermot stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "It's never enough." Tashyana froze for a moment, gripping the edge of the sink as if bracing herself, her lips pressed into a thin line, her patience strained but intact. "Da Mott," she said evenly, turning to face him. "I don't know what you want from me. I'm trying my best. For the kids. For us." But her calm only seemed to enrage him further. He slammed his fist onto the counter, the sound reverberating through the house. "Your best?" he scoffed. "Your best is ignoring me, acting like I don't exist, like I'm not part of this family?" Tashiana's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her composure. "That's not true, Dermot. You know that's not true." "Do I?" he shot back, his voice rising. "Because all I see is you playing the perfect mum, the perfect wife, for your Instagram followers. But when it's just us, you don't even care." The mention of social media stung. Tashiana had always tried to balance her online presence with her family life, but Dermot saw it differently. He saw it as a competition, a spotlight that never shone on him. "Dermot, this isn't about Instagram," she said softly, trying to de-escalate. "This is about you and me. We need to figure out how to talk to each other without it turning into this." "This?" he repeated, his voice dripping with venom. "This is what you've turned it into, Tashiana. You always have to be right, don't you?" The argument felt like a whirlpool, pulling them both deeper with every word. And then something shifted. Dermot's anger took on a darker, more dangerous edge. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You think you can just walk all over me, don't you? Like I'm nothing." Tashiana took a step back, her instinct screaming at her to put distance between them. "Dermot, please," she said, her voice trembling now. "Let's just take a breath. This isn't going anywhere good." But Dermot wasn't listening. His rage had taken control, blinding him to reason. The children, who had been asleep upstairs, were startled awake by the escalating voices. Their youngest, Mia, peeked out of her bedroom, clutching a stuffed animal tightly. She tiptoed to her older brother's room, her wide eyes filled with fear. "Devin," she whispered, shaking him gently. "Mommy and Daddy are fighting again." Devin sat up groggily, rubbing his eyes. He was only 10, but nights like these had forced him to grow up faster than he should have. "Stay here," he told his sister, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. He crept down the stairs just as the shouting grew louder. In the kitchen, Dermot's anger was reaching its peak. Tashiana stood her ground, but her voice was firm now, unwavering. "This has to stop, Dermot," she said. "The kids are upstairs, they don't need to hear this." "Oh, now you care about what the kids hear," he sneered. "Where was that concern when you were flaunting our life for strangers online?" The argument escalated, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of blame and frustration. Neither of them noticed Devin standing at the bottom of the stairs, his small frame barely visible in the shadows. And then it happened. Dermot's hand shot out, grabbing a nearby object, a heavy glass vase from the counter. He didn't think, didn't pause. It was pure instinct, driven by anger and years of unresolved pain. He hurled it at the wall, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. The sound was deafening, silencing them both. Tashiana stared at the broken shards on the floor, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She turned to Dermot, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "What is wrong with you?" she whispered. But before he could answer, Devin stepped into the room. "Stop it!" he shouted, his voice trembling but loud enough to cut through the tension. Both parents turned to look at him, their anger momentarily replaced by shock. "Devin, go back upstairs," Tashiana said quickly, her voice firm but gentle. The boy shook his head. "No, you guys always fight, and it's not fair. Just stop." Dermot's expression softened for a brief moment, guilt flashing across his face. But it was fleeting. The storm inside him was far from over. Hours later, after the children had been sent back to bed, the house fell into an uneasy silence. Tashiana sat on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to hold herself together. Dermot paced the living room, his movements erratic. He muttered under his breath, words that Tatiana couldn't quite make out. "Dermot," she said cautiously, "maybe we need some time apart. Just to cool down, to think." His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Time apart? That's your solution? To run away?" "I'm not running," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm trying to save us, but this isn't working." Her words hit him like a blow. In his mind, they weren't an attempt to salvage their relationship. They were a betrayal. "You want to leave me?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That's not what I said," Tatiana replied, standing now. She could feel the situation spiraling out of control, and her instincts told her to get out of the house. "I'm going to take a drive. We can talk when things have calmed down." But Dermot blocked her path, his movements deliberate. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice cold. The air between them grew thick with tension, a silent battle of wills. And then, in a flash, Dermot made a choice. A choice that would change everything forever. In a moment of madness, of uncontrollable rage, Dermot pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the house, but it wasn't just a sound. It was the end of Tatiana's life. Her body crumpled to the floor, the vibrant woman who had once lit up every room reduced to silence. Upstairs, the children clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces as the sound of the gunshot shattered their world. And in the aftermath, as Dermot stood over the woman he once promised to love and protect, the weight of his actions began to sink in. But by then it was far too late. The air in the house felt thick with the weight of what had just happened. Silence descended, broken only by the sound of Dermot's heavy breathing, the blood staining his hands. His mind raced, trying to process the violent act he had just committed. His thoughts were fragmented, overwhelmed by the chaos unfolding around him. And then, as if pulled by some invisible force, Dermot did the unthinkable. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and dialed 911. The words that left his mouth were cold, detached, as if he were speaking about something that happened to someone else. The operator's calm voice came through the line, asking him for details. "I just shot my wife. I need help," Dermot said, his tone eerily controlled. "I don't know what happened. She didn't say she was sorry. I couldn't take it anymore." The words hung in the air, chilling in their simplicity. The operator responded swiftly, but the surreal nature of the call was almost impossible to grasp. How could someone so calm, so collected, be speaking about taking a life? His lack of remorse, his inability to comprehend the severity of his actions, sent a shiver down anyone who heard the call. The police, already on their way, raced toward the house. As they arrived, the scene that awaited them was nothing short of horrifying. Officers flooded the front door, their eyes scanning the home for any sign of life. The bloodstains on the floor told the story before they even saw Tatiana's body. She lay there, lifeless, her eyes staring blankly into the space around her. The tragic irony of the moment hit them all. This had been a family once, full of love and promise, and now all that remained was the remnants of an act so senseless that it defied logic. The officers quickly secured the house, ensuring that no one else was in danger. They found Dermot standing in the corner of the living room, his face blank, his eyes glazed over as if still lost in a haze of disbelief. There was no panic, no signs of guilt. His posture was stiff, his demeanor completely detached from the horror surrounding him. When they placed him under arrest, Dermot barely reacted. There was no outburst, no denial. He simply stood there, as if waiting for this moment to come, knowing deep down that it was inevitable. The officer's handcuffs clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the room, but even that sound felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else's story.
As the police processed the scene and took Dermot into custody, the weight of the tragedy began to settle on the small town. How could something like this happen? How could a life, Tatiana's life, be taken over something as simple as human, as a disagreement? The circumstances leading up to her death seemed too absurd to comprehend. Dermot's confession on the 911th call was chilling, his justification baffling. He was a man consumed by his own pride, someone who couldn't bear even the slightest hint of disrespect. And in his eyes, the absence of an apology from his wife was the spark that ignited the violence. It wasn't about the years of strained communication, the battles they fought in silence, or the cracks that had long since formed in their relationship. It was about power, control, and the deep, twisted belief that he had been wronged in a way that could never be fixed. But the real horror lay not just in the act itself, but in the aftermath. How the pieces of this shattered family were left behind, struggling to make sense of a tragedy they could never fully understand. As the news of Tashiana's death spread, the shockwaves reverberated through the community. Friends, family, and neighbors were left to pick up the pieces. They all remembered Tashiana as a woman full of life who had tried to balance the demands of family and social media with grace. They remembered the way she would light up a room with her smile, the way she always seemed to be holding everything together. But now all that was gone, replaced by an emptiness that could never be filled. And Dermot, the man who had once promised to love and protect her, was left in the cold, surrounded by the consequences of his own actions. His reason for the crime, his need for an apology, his inability to control his rage, seemed to be a grotesque attempt to justify the unthinkable. But the cold reality was that nothing could ever justify what he had done. Oh. The investigation into Tashiana's death quickly revealed the extent of Dermot's troubled mind. Authorities uncovered a history of violent outbursts, irrational behavior, and disturbing patterns of control. It became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was the culmination of years of simmering anger, bottled up frustration, and an inability to handle the stresses that had plagued his life. But what was perhaps most unsettling was the fact that Dermot didn't seem to fully grasp the severity of what he had done. There were no tears, no remorse. He spoke about Tashiana in cold, distant terms, as if she were just another figure in a story he could manipulate to fit his narrative. As the police processed the scene and gathered evidence, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Tashiana's family, still reeling from the shock, struggled to understand how things had gone so horribly wrong. The children, too young to comprehend the full extent of the tragedy, were left to navigate a world where their mother was gone, and their father's actions had forever changed the course of their lives. But even in the midst of this devastation, one question lingered. What drove Dermot to this breaking point? Was it the pressure of his past, the unresolved trauma from his time in the military, or something darker, something deeper? The investigation would reveal answers that would unravel even more of the twisted reality that had led to Tashiana's death. For now, all anyone could do was try to pick up the pieces. But the story was far from over. There were still many questions to answer, many layers to uncover, and a truth that was yet to be fully revealed. In the aftermath of Tashiana's tragic death, the community grappled with the profound loss of a vibrant life cut short. Her family and friends were left to navigate the void left by her absence, particularly her two young children who had witnessed the unthinkable. The trauma they endured was immeasurable, and the courtroom was heavy with emotion as the verdict was read. Dermot Blake, a former soldier, had been found guilty of first-degree murder for the brutal killing of his wife, Tashiana, in front of their two young daughters. The tragic events of that February night in 2021 had left an indelible mark on two families, shattering lives and leaving unanswered questions. On September, for many, the trial was as harrowing as the crime itself. The defense argued that Blake's actions were impulsive, influenced by alcohol and his mental state, but the prosecution painted a much darker picture. Surveillance footage from the family's doorbell captured the sound of gunshots echoing over 5 long minutes, accompanied by Tashiana's desperate pleas for him to stop. 11 shots, 11 deliberate actions. The final one, fired at point-blank range, ended her life. In the sentencing hearing, the echoes of that violence were felt deeply. Friends and family of Tashiana spoke of the void left by her loss. Her stepmother, Marie Johnson, expressed the anguish of watching two innocent children robbed of their mother and of their sense of safety. He didn't just take her life, he took their lives too, she said tearfully. Tashiana's sister, Kelsey, remembered her as a bright fire whose spirit Dermot couldn't extinguish in life, but tragically did in death. Judge Samuel Evig, addressing the courtroom, acknowledged the irreversible devastation caused by Blake's actions. He praised Tashiana's daughters for their bravery in recounting the horror they had endured, calling them a testament to resilience in the face of unimaginable pain. Yet, he admitted, no sentence, neither the mandatory life imprisonment nor the additional sentences for child abuse, could ever truly bring justice for what had been taken. While the legal battle concluded with Blake's conviction and sentencing, murmurs of an appeal loomed. The defense raised issues about evidence they claimed was withheld, information that could have allegedly pointed to a potential affair by Tashiana, which they argued might have influenced the jury's perception of the crime. But even this claim, fraught with controversy, did little to sway the court or diminish the weight of Blake's guilt. For Tashiana's family, the trial's end was only the beginning of a long journey toward healing. Her daughters, left with scars far deeper than physical, were now under the care of their maternal grandparents. The community rallied to support them, organizing vigils and memorials to honor Tashiana's memory and raise awareness about domestic violence. This case serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked rage and the importance of addressing mental health struggles, particularly among veterans. It also underscores the critical need for vigilance and action in preventing domestic violence before it escalates into tragedy. If you believe in supporting victims of domestic violence and protecting the innocent, please subscribe to our channel. Let's work together to shine a light on these stories and create a world where such tragedies are no longer a part of our reality.